Welcome to episode 2 of my building the miniature version of the HMS Victory. I'm going to try and be brief and get right into the build. I just want to remind you that now, because I have over 10,000 subscribers, that I can advertise some products through Amazon and other sources, Home Depot as an example. And if you look below the video or off to the right, if you select one of the products and you purchase from that link, those companies will pay me a small commission. I think that's a neat thing. That's a benefit to YouTube producers like myself, so that we can earn a little extra money. Not that money is my goal. It does pay for my hobby, which is a nice thing. So if you see a product that I'm using and I put a link, I'd appreciate it if you'd check it out. If you want to purchase it through that link. It does not affect the price you pay. It is just a benefit on my behalf for the work that I do. Let's get right into where I'm at on building this little miniature ship that actually is pretty cool. I don't think you can tell on camera, but on these supports, one side, let's see, is just flat, and the other side has a line on it, so it's more decorative. And if you zoom in on the instructions, you see that this G2 attaches to the back side, and this is where the line is, the more engraved part of this piece. Just a small thing, but something to pay attention to. In several cases, when you're doing model ships, they show one example, but you may have more than one to make. And in this case, there are actually 4 of these. And on this, I use wood glue so that I have a little more time to adjust it and move it around just slightly. And then I just hold it in place with these little alligator clips. I use a variety of different clip things, whatever I have around that seems to work best. And the alligator clip isn't too strong, but it's strong enough to hold it together. I'll let that sit for about a half hour to an hour, and then I can take those off. I may have mentioned before, but this ship has several parts that are very fragile and easy to break. And here's the ship's wheel. What I would recommend is not using these types of blades. They're too thick. Even this style, unless you have a brand new blade and it's very sharp. I've had better success using one of these X-Acto knives, but also start with a fresh blade, and there we go. Gives me a fresh blade. This goes back on the back of the tool. Move this out a little bit and start the surgery. And again, just take your time and try and get pieces to come off. I'm not looking for the tabs that connect it. I'm just looking for where. Now there's one of the tabs, so I'll be careful now that it's free. So you can see the little tabs right there. Well, maybe you can't see, but that's where it was. So I'm going to turn it over because you can normally see the tab a little better from the back side. Sometimes wearing magnifying glasses also can help, which I have a set. Hopefully I don't end up wishing I had put them on. There are 2 of these. I'm guessing you glue them together to make it thicker. Haven't determined that yet for sure. As careful as I was trying to be, this little peg here did kind of snap off. It's just on there by a thread of wood. So but because I stained this prior, I can put a little bit of adhesive glue under that and it'll hold it in place and it won't show. If you glue before stain, the stain will not stick and you'll have a white spot. I'm working on this grate and the framing for it, and something that can come in handy. This is just a very small square, and even though you think you could eyeball that and get it nice and square, you'll find that you can't. And again, using wood glue on this set because it gives me more time to just put it in place like that and let it dry. The next step will be to secure this grate on top of it. After you do the initial assembly of a lot of the small parts that go on the deck, the instructions have you put those in place. I'm not necessarily going to do that at this point because I'm going to be turning the ship quite a bit and I don't want to break anything off, so I put the deck in place, but I'm going to wait a little while before I start putting those small parts on. I've taken dowels and put them in where the mast would go just to help line up this top deck, and I've glued it in place now, just waiting a little bit for it to dry. Now that I have the decks in place, I'm going to start putting some of the planking on the sides. And I started with the very top one. I don't know if they go numerically because here's 43 and it works its way down to 46. Then it goes up to part 47. It doesn't really indicate what piece you put on first. So I went ahead and put the top section on first because I wanted it to line up properly with the deck. So this little cutout here should be level with the deck. Then the back and the front should be raised just a little bit, and you want it to match up so when you put cannons on this level, they will fit in there. Now, I have done something that if you're a beginning builder, I'm not going to suggest you do this. The kit has the cannon port covers on almost all the cannons. They are closed. I'm going to have them open, and I've made these little false cannon supports. So these are back. There's a small hole, and what I will do is I will taper the cannon down, stick it in there, and you can see they're painted black, so it gives it depth. That's a little tricky to get them to fit in between, but I'm going to make it work on this, and I got them all to fit. There are 4 or 5 where cannons will actually be placed with the cannon base and everything, and they're where this opening is, so I can get to those. All the rest will be false. And then there's, as an example on this particular one, when I made these, there's one that is not going to fit in place, and it's because this support hits right where that cannon opening is. I have an option. I've glued around it so I could cut this member out, and that'll slide in. I'm giving that serious consideration. The other thing is I could just put one of the cannon door covers and close that particular one. So we'll see what I decide to do. But I've got a lot of these to make. For all these parts that go on the side of the ship with cannon ports and this little strip that separates them, there's no identifier that tells you which panel goes on which side. You can see there's 43 through 46 here and 43 through 46 on this other sheet. There is a curvature, and I think you can see it on here. That curvature part goes towards the front of the ship on all those parts. And the reason for that is it builds in when you make this curve. Anytime you make a curve when you're building a ship, it's going to change the angle of the wood. When I get down to the planks, I'm going to show you a technique that will help you get those to fit in, because normally you'll end up with weird gaps, and that's the difficult part of planking. There's some geniuses out there that can make a grid and do all kinds of line work and use, I don't know if it's geometry or what, and make the parts in advance. I cannot, but I'll show you a simple way to do it. I am taking this side piece, and this goes towards the front of the ship, and it's going to have a pretty strong bend to it. I'm going to let it soak in hot water, probably for a minute or two. This is pretty thin, porous wood. so hopefully it won't take too long. I have a soldering iron. It is hot and ready to go. I used to have a tool that had it was a soldering iron with a end on it that was probably round, like this shape. That was a nice thing to have. Mine burned up and I just have not replaced it. So I've been using just a regular old soldering iron. Now this has only been in there a few seconds, but I'm going to try and get the bend that I need. I am taking this side piece, and this goes towards the front of the ship, and it's going to have a pretty strong bend to it. I'm going to let it soak in hot water, probably for a minute or two. This is pretty thin, porous wood, so hopefully it won't take too long. I have a soldering iron. It is hot and ready to go. I used to have a tool that had it was a soldering iron with a end on it that was probably round, like this shape. That was a nice thing to have. Mine burned up and I just have not replaced it. So I've been using just a regular old soldering iron. Now this has only been in there a few seconds, but I'm going to try and get the bend that I need. And this wooden thing helps protect your fingers from not getting burnt. This is where you want to watch out for your fingers. You don't want to burn yourself. I have that bend in place now, and I'm happy with the contour that it is. I put this rubber band on there. I'm going to hold it in place. I'm going to let this dry naturally, and then it'll hold the bend much better, and I will get it glued in place. I'll duplicate that on the other side and with any other of these planking members that are going to come around that curve. When it comes to planking a ship, again, it's important to be able to get these curves bent. What I have started doing is using a combination of CA glue or super glue. This happens to be a thicker variety, which I prefer, to enhance it using some sort of a spray that really speeds up the hardening process. And I'll show you how I do that. I'll put the CA glue around this curve because then I'll hold it in position. I'll do this straight away later, but this I want to get positioned pretty solidly. Now on the other surface is where I will use the spray. And let me turn this so you can kind of see. It's basically like an alcohol that really dries out the wood and makes this adhere almost instantly. So you have to get it in the right spot, put it down, and then hold it in place for about 10 seconds. It really takes less than that, but to be sure, 10 seconds. And you don't want to get your fingers in any of it because you'll be attached to the ship as well. So this is in real time. I'm going to try and let it go. Have my thumb a little bit to it. And you can tell that's stuck on there pretty tight. I'm going to let that dry some more because you can see I'm going to put some pressure on it to bring this piece back down and get it lined up. When I do the sides, I'll cover that now. I will do a combination. I'll put regular wood glue, and I'll normally apply it with a brush. So I'll put a little pool of it on a piece of tape or something around. And then I will just brush, let me use it as an example down here. I'll just put it on about 4 or 5, and then the 5th one, I'll use the CA glue. And that'll harden quicker and help hold it all in place. I noticed these little notches were cut out, and the last window section should have fit in, I think, and come right to that notch. However, I'm a little low, so I must have spaced these out a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a little razor blade knife and making this little channel a little wider. Then there's this little line here, and I think that's where the first regular plank goes. We'll see how that lines up. When we start going around this bend, there's a technique that I will show you on each individual plank that'll make it so it doesn't have a gap. See, when you go around a curve like this, that will create a gap on the outside of your plank. I should have mentioned earlier, I did pre-paint these items, and you probably noticed that originally this was this beige color, and then I've gone back after I researched the actual ship. This should be a very dark gray. I know it appears black on camera, but it's a very, very dark gray. And I'll do some touch-ups once the ship is finished. I have this last piece glued in place. The other thing, see this black indication that I had, that I thought maybe was where the first regular planks start. That might be an indication of where the water line would be, because this actual ship, the bottom was copper plated, and that was to protect it from different organisms in the ocean that would eat the wood, and actually did a lot of serious damage to the actual ship. I'm debating, I may copper the bottom, I may not. The kit doesn't cover that part of the build at all, but I may copper leaf it and then age the copper. We'll see. As I get ready to plank, here's another tool that you can make yourself out of. These are like paper clippy things. You can get it in any office supply area in your big box store or a office supply store. And what you do is you use this to hold these in place as the glue dries. You just put them all down the line as you go. It can go this direction, or you can flip it around and do this direction with the two little prongs. I use whatever works best at the time. So they come like this. You'll have to sacrifice a few to make these. So then you unplug this. So you just take a pair of pliers or something and bend that in, and it'll pop right out. And then once you get it popped out, you put it in this. You have to open wide. Open this as far as you can. Slide this in place and force it down in there. There you go. And that gives you your little clamping tool. Here these are in place, and it'll hold that last gun port section in place till it dries. Again, I did a combination of wood glue and probably three spots that I used the CA glue. I used the CA glue right on the very end to hold that down because I couldn't use any of these clips there. So we'll let that dry, and then we're ready to start planking. And there's two different techniques that I'll show you. One to cover the bend going around, and the other is there will be gaps created. It's geometry. I don't understand it, but you'd think you could just keep doing straight planks, but you can't. That's the reason these gun ports had that odd curve to it and shape. So that was figured in for the top. It is not figured in for the bottom. So I'm going to show you how to correct that, make it so it'll come out nice and even. This concludes episode 2 of my building the HMS Victory. Thanks for following along. I hope I have helped some of you that are beginning builders. That's what I'm making this particular video for. This is Boiler Dan 1, and as always, thanks for watching.